The reporting that outed Donald Trump as having been convinced by Benjamin Netanyahu to try to remove Lebanon from the points of consideration in the Iran ceasefire deal was hardly well received by some of Donald Trump's, at least at one point, allies in the media on the right. Now, many of them are harsh critics of his and him of them. Let's start with MEGYN Kelly, who he recently called a low IQ failure.
I don't know how we got here, Piers. I'd like to know just as much as anybody else, but all I can think in my head, based on what I've read in the paper, is we got here thanks to Bibi Netanyahu, Lindsey Graham, and Mark Levin. And ultimately President Trump. That's not to take agency away from the president, who was bamboozled. I don't know why. He was too weak to say no. He was too gullible to see through the lies. One way or another, he allowed himself to be pushed into this insane conflict that caused, forget, the blood and treasure we spilled. As you point out, at least 15 service personnel, I believe, were being lied to about the total number of dead and wounded.
So she doesn't necessarily go as far as you might in terms of describing the relationship, although clearly she believes it's possible he's being manipulated or whatever, and she's feeling a little bit more open to insult him, talking about his weakness and that sort of thing. Bear in mind, she also said earlier this week that if he were to nuke a country, she'd still vote for him. So it's not like she's a totally Trump derangement syndrome critic of his. She's okay with quite a bit that he might do, but she can also identify that it doesn't seem like these are two equals, let alone us being like a superior in the alliance that we have. So that's MEGYN Kelly. We also have Benny Johnson.
We don't want some other nation to walk into our White House and to lie about an operation to our president. And that's what happened. That's what Israel did here. It's unforgivable as far as I'm concerned. So it shouldn't happen anyway. I think that Bibi Netanyahu should be banned from the White House as far as I'm concerned. Along with any other world leader like that behaves in a duplicitous fashion. And Zelensky should be on that list, obviously.
Yeah, maybe not obviously, but we're going to disagree on quite a lot. Cenk, what do you make of their views?
Yeah, so look, this is why I'm frustrated by the polls. It's a story we'll get to later in the show, but now all of a sudden people are pulling polls out of their ass, pretending that there's no right-wingers dissatisfied with what Trump is doing. I mean, I have eyes and ears, you have eyes and ears. Benny Johnson, MEGYN Kelly, Tucker Carlson, later Tim Pool, Alex Jones, etc. We're going to show that throughout the show today. They don't have millions of viewers. No one follows them. This is, of course. Look, and then let's say that it's not blackmail for a second. Then okay, Trump is the most gullible idiot we've ever had. Then you have to agree with me. He's the dumbest guy to ever hold office. Because Netanyahu says to him, "Oh, why don't you ruin the peace deal you just made?" And he goes, "Oh, okay." And he doesn't understand that that's going to cost us $2 million a ship in the Strait of Hormuz. He said that he got convinced by the Israelis that the Strait of Hormuz wouldn't get closed. Everyone knew that if you started a war with Iran, that they would close the Strait of Hormuz. But apparently Trump says he's so dumb that the Israelis talked him into not realizing that. And the Israelis told him that the Iranians would not attack our bases in the Gulf. And Donald Trump said after the war started, well, nobody expected them to attack our bases in the Gulf. I did. Literally every expert on the war did. So the best possible explanation for Donald Trump is that he is a moron of epic proportions. Because the only other explanation is when Netanyahu calls and says jump, he says, "How high, master?" Because Netanyahu has something on him. By the way, Asimov's Prophet's a member of ours on TYT.com. And he made an excellent point that I hadn't thought of before. He just wrote in, not releasing the Epstein files at this point is a national security threat because of the blackmail against Trump. Now, we don't know that there's blackmail against Trump, but any rational person realizes that that's a possibility. So because of that possibility, you're absolutely right. If we don't know what's in the Epstein files, we don't know what might be being held against our president or other politicians in this country. So we have to know it. Otherwise, it's a national security threat. But of course, they're not going to be released either. You're going to be shocked to find out Israel is against releasing the Epstein files. Yeah, I wonder why, right? And if you don't know, Epstein in every deal was trying to help Israel procuring cyber weapons for them. He taped all, he had video cameras all across his house, including in the tissue boxes, which leads us to Tucker Carlson and his theory on blackmail.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't have like that in detail ready to go, but he has been talking sort of in response to a story that's going to be on the show later on, where Donald Trump just broadsided like everyone in MAGA media. Tucker Carlson has run it in a couple different ways, and one of those is going to be the belief that this is possibly the result of blackmail coming from Israel.
Yeah, and guys, look, how did Netanyahu know about Monica Lewinsky before anyone else? I mean, there's only two possible answers. One is she was working with them, and it was a honey trap operation. I know mainstream media reporters are so stupid that they don't understand that a honey trap operation is the #1 go-to move for any intelligence agency. They think that it's the thing that doesn't even exist and couldn't possibly be done to Americans. Because American politicians are so holy and moral, they'd never fall for a young girl, except for the fact that we know Bill Clinton did. Okay, now I'm not saying Monica was, I have no idea, okay? But the other possibility is that Israel has the White House, has other things bugged to no end. And they know everything that we're saying. And given that they've stolen our top secrets through Jonathan Pollard, given that they've stolen our nuclear secrets, that's also a high likelihood. But every time you say these things that are demonstrable facts, mainstream media says, shut up. Never ask the government any questions that challenges them. Never ask Israel any questions. Never wonder if our president is being blackmailed. What, you're not even allowed to ask that question? Isn't that super weird? Why is our president acting so strange in regards to one particular country? Why is he doing things that are demonstrably against his own interests and against his own policies? And if you say it's illegitimate to ask those questions, that's your problem, man. We're gonna keep asking them and asking them. And you could now, and I think that even the phrase conspiracy theory was concocted as a brilliant piece of propaganda for if anyone ever questioned any official government statement, you call them a conspiracy theorist so that no one ever questions the official government statements. So I think our media has been in the business of covering up the news for decades. I think that they cover for Israel at every turn. You should never believe them. They're gigantic liars. And yes, there's something deeply wrong with how President Trump always listens to Netanyahu.
Yeah. Yeah, sort of shocking actually, my final point, that CBS was the ones that actually came out with this. I don't know if they'll be allowed to do like a 60 minutes like in-depth report on it, but apparently there are still a couple of journalists that are allowed to do their work for now at CBS.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.